I'll never forget the look in my daughter Rachel's eyes when she told me I was becoming a financial burden. After 40 years of putting her needs before mine, sacrificing my retirement savings to fund her education, and helping her buy her first home. That single moment shattered everything I thought we had. But what she didn't know was that I had been quietly building something that would change both our lives forever. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the first ones to throw you away when you're no longer useful to them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought I'd be sitting here at 64 telling this story. My name is Eleanor Wright, and for 4 decades I poured every ounce of love, energy, and financial resource I had into raising my daughter Rachel. I was just 24 when I had her, young, scared, and completely on my own after her father James walked out when I was 7 months pregnant. He claimed he wasn't ready for the responsibility, leaving me to figure out how to be both mother and father to our child. Those early years were brutally difficult. I worked 3 jobs, receptionist during weekdays, waitressing evenings, and weekend shifts at a local grocery store. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every morning, I'd drop Rachel at my elderly neighbor Doris's apartment before sunrise, picking her up well after dark. The guilt ate at me constantly, but I had no choice. We needed to survive. Despite the exhaustion, I never once resented my daughter. Rachel was bright, inquisitive, with hazel eyes that seemed to take in the entire world. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile when I'd come home to her little arms wrapping around my neck, her voice excitedly telling me about her day. I promised myself that no matter what, Rachel would have opportunities I never did. As she grew, I poured everything into her future. When other parents saved for retirement, I saved for her college fund. When my coworkers took vacations, I picked up extra shifts to pay for Rachel's piano lessons, science camps, and private tutoring. Her success became my only measure of success. My boss at the bank where I worked as a customer service representative would constantly urge me, "Eleanor, you need to think about your own future too." But in my mind, Rachel was my future. By the time she graduated high school, Rachel was exceptional, valedictorian, scholarship offers to several universities, and the kind of confidence I'd always hoped to instill in her. She chose Westridge University, a prestigious private school across the country with a renowned business program. The scholarship covered most of her tuition, but not her living expenses, meal plans, or textbooks. Without hesitation, I liquidated my modest 401k, paying the early withdrawal penalties just to make sure she could focus on her studies without financial stress. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Rachel had asked, her eyes wide when I handed her the check. "What about your retirement?" "Don't worry about me," I'd said with a reassuring smile. "I'll be working for many more years. This is your time to shine. Just promise me you'll make the most of it." And she did. Rachel graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, securing a coveted position at Meridian Financial Consulting. I couldn't have been prouder watching her walk across that stage, knowing all our sacrifices had paid off. What I didn't tell her was that I'd had to refinance our small home to cover her final year of expenses when the remaining college fund ran out. When Rachel got engaged to William, a charming investment banker from an affluent family, I was thrilled for her. They seemed perfect together, both ambitious, intelligent, and driven. His family welcomed her warmly, though I always felt slightly out of place at their country club gatherings and vacation home dinners. William's mother, Caroline, would often make subtle comments about my quaint lifestyle or simple tastes, but I brushed them off. Rachel was happy, and that's all that mattered. The wedding was extravagant, held at William's family estate. Though I couldn't contribute much financially, I spent months handcrafting decorations, addressing invitations, and coordinating with vendors to save them money. At the reception, Caroline pulled me aside with a champagne flute in hand. "Eleanor," she said with that practiced smile of hers, "I must say you've done a remarkable job raising Rachel on your own. She's turned out quite polished despite her circumstances." She sipped her champagne, eyeing me over the rim. "William tells me you're still working at that little bank. Have you thought about retirement at all?" My cheeks burned. "I have. Some time yet," I replied evenly, "and I love my work." What I didn't mention was that at 58, I had exactly $17,243 in retirement savings, having restarted from zero after funding Rachel's education. My plan was simple: work until 70, then live modestly on Social Security and whatever small amount I could save in the remaining years. 2 years after the wedding, Rachel and William decided to buy their first home, a beautiful colonial, in an upscale neighborhood. To my surprise, they asked if I would help with the down payment. "It's an investment opportunity, Mom," Rachel explained over coffee at my kitchen table. "Property in this area is guaranteed to appreciate. We'd pay you back with interest in a few years." I hesitated. "Honey, I don't have much savings. Most of what I had went to your education." Rachel reached for my hand, her expression softening. "I know, and I'm so grateful, but this is a chance for all of us. If we secure this house now, when we have children, you could move in with us instead of paying rent on your place. We'd have the space, and you could help with the grandkids. It's the perfect solution for everyone's future." The idea of being close to future grandchildren was irresistible. That afternoon, I called my bank and took out a home equity loan against my nearly paid-off house. The $85,000 I gave them was almost everything I had, but Rachel's vision of our future together made it seem worthwhile. 3 years passed. Rachel and William thrived in their careers, their home, and their social circles. I continued working at the bank, now putting in overtime whenever possible to rebuild some savings. My health had begun to decline slightly. Nothing serious, just the natural consequences of decades of stress and overwork. Chronic back pain from years of standing as a waitress, arthritis in my hands, the beginnings of cataracts that would eventually need surgery. Then came the day that changed everything. I was at work when the dizziness hit me, a sudden, overwhelming vertigo that sent me stumbling into a nearby desk before collapsing. I woke up in the hospital to the concerned face of Dr. Morris, who explained I'd suffered a mild stroke. "You're lucky, Eleanor," she said, reviewing my chart. "There's no permanent damage, but this is a warning sign. Your blood pressure is dangerously high and you're showing signs of chronic stress. You need to make significant lifestyle changes." The recommendation was clear: reduce my work hours, eliminate stress, focus on recovery, and follow up with multiple specialists. The bank was understanding, allowing me to reduce to part-time. But with that came the harsh reality of a significantly reduced income and lost health benefits. That evening, Rachel and William visited me in the hospital. Rachel was visibly shaken, holding my hand tightly while William stood awkwardly by the door, checking his watch occasionally. "Mom, this is serious," Rachel said. "You can't keep working like this." "I don't have much choice, sweetie," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The medical bills alone are going to be substantial, even with my insurance. Rachel and William exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've been talking," she said slowly. "Maybe it's time to consider that arrangement we discussed when we bought the house. You could move in with us sooner rather than later. Sell your place, use that money for your medical expenses, and recover properly without worrying about work." The offer hung in the air. There was something in her tone, not quite reluctance, but not wholehearted either. Still, I was touched. by what seemed like genuine concern. "Let me think about it," I said. "It's a big decision." 2 weeks later, after being discharged and settling back into my home, I invited Rachel over for lunch to discuss the offer more seriously. My modest house had appreciated considerably in the competitive housing market, and selling would indeed provide a financial cushion for my healthcare needs. Plus, the idea of being close to Rachel during my recovery was comforting. Rachel arrived, late, looking harried and checking her phone repeatedly. "Sorry, Mom. Crazy day at work. The Jensen account is a nightmare." I set out the homemade soup I'd prepared, despite my fatigue. "No problem, honey. I appreciate you making time." As we ate, I broached the subject. "I've been thinking about your offer. If you and William are sure, I think moving in with you might be the right decision, at least temporarily, until I'm back on my feet." Rachel set down her spoon, her expression shifting slightly. "About that, William and I have been discussing the logistics." She straightened, adopting what I recognized as her professional. "Oh, we have the space in the downstairs guest suite, which would work perfectly for you. We'd need to set some ground rules, of course, about privacy and schedules. And given our careers, we couldn't be your caretakers. You'd need to arrange for any medical assistance you require." "I understand," I nodded. "I don't expect you to be my nurses. I'm recovering well, and mostly just need to reduce stress. There's also the financial aspect," she continued, now avoiding my gaze. "Our household expenses would increase with another person. Utilities, groceries, that sort of thing." I blinked, caught off guard. "Of course. I'd contribute what I could from my part-time salary." "Actually," she interrupted, "we were thinking you could pay a monthly amount for room and board. Nothing exorbitant, just enough to cover the additional costs. Say, $200 a month?" The amount hung between us, nearly 2/3 of what I would be earning part-time. I must have looked shocked because Rachel quickly added, "It's still much less than you're paying for this place, and you'd have the proceeds from the sale to cover your medical expenses." "I see," I said slowly, trying to process this unexpected turn. "And the money I contributed to your down payment? I had thought perhaps that might offset some of the costs, given that it was quite substantial." Rachel's face flushed. "Mom, that was years ago. We've put a lot into the house since then. Renovations, upgrades. Its value has more to do with our improvements in the market than the initial down payment." Something cold settled in my stomach. I looked at my daughter, her designer watch, her perfectly highlighted hair, the casual way she dismissed $85,000 as insignificant. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. This wasn't the grateful child I'd sacrificed everything for. This was someone who had grown accustomed to taking, with little thought of giving back. "You know," I said carefully, "I think I need more time to consider everything. My recovery is going well, and Dr. Morris believes I might be able to return to full-time work sooner than expected." This wasn't true, but I needed space to think. Rachel seemed relieved, quickly changing the subject to her upcoming vacation to Bali with William. As she chatted animatedly about beachfront villas and snorkeling excursions, I felt a deep ache in my chest that had nothing to do with my recent health scare. After Rachel left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the faded photograph of us from her college graduation, her beaming with promise, me with the proud, exhausted smile of a mother who had given everything. Had I made a terrible mistake somewhere along the way? Had my unquestioning generosity created this entitled adult who now saw me as a financial transaction to be managed? I picked up the phone and called Mary, my oldest friend who had often warned me about doing too much for Rachel. Mary had raised her own children with a firm belief in teaching them self-reliance and financial independence. We'd disagreed often on parenting approaches over the years. "She wants to charge me rent," I said after explaining the situation. "Her own mother, who just had a stroke." Mary was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Ellie. That must hurt terribly. She paused. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. I can't afford to keep this house on part-time wages, but giving most of my reduced income to Rachel and William, who make more in a month than I do in a year, feels wrong. You know, Mary said carefully, you've always put Rachel first, often at your own expense. Maybe it's finally time to put yourself first for once. Her words stayed with me that night as I lay awake, my mind racing. Put myself first? The concept felt almost foreign after decades of making Rachel my priority. But as the dawn light filtered through my curtains, something shifted inside me. A resolve I hadn't felt in years began to take form. I reached for the bedside drawer and pulled out a letter I'd received 3 weeks before my stroke, a letter I'd nearly forgotten in the chaos that followed. It was from Martin Abernathy, the regional manager who had hired me at First Capital Bank 15 years ago, before moving to the corporate office. Martin had been a mentor and friend, always pushing me to advance my career and build financial security. The letter was brief but warm, congratulating me on my years of service and asking if we could meet for coffee when he was in town the following month. He mentioned a potential opportunity he thought might interest me. I hadn't responded yet, distracted by my health crisis. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and composed an email to Martin, apologizing for the delayed response and explaining my recent health challenges. I asked if he was still interested in meeting, perhaps next week when I was feeling stronger. His response came within hours, concerned about my health, but enthusiastic about meeting. We set a date for the following Tuesday at a quiet cafe near my home. That meeting would be the first step toward reclaiming my life and discovering that sometimes the greatest lessons we teach our children come not from what we give them, but from what we finally have the courage to withhold. The cafe where I met Martin was tucked away on a quiet street, with warm lighting and the comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee. I arrived early, nervously smoothing my blouse, one of the few nice pieces I still owned from my days working full-time at the bank. Despite our years of friendship, I felt oddly vulnerable. My health crisis had shaken my confidence in ways I hadn't fully processed. Martin spotted me immediately, his familiar smile crinkling the corners of his eyes as he crossed the room. He'd aged since I'd last seen him, more silver in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth, but his energy remained unchanged. "Eleanor," he said warmly, embracing me briefly before settling into the chair opposite mine. "It's wonderful to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. How are you feeling?" "Better every day," I replied, trying to project more strength than I felt. "The doctors say I'm lucky, no lasting damage, just need to take things slower for a while." Martin nodded, his expression softening with genuine concern. "And the bank? They're accommodating your recovery?" "They've been kind enough to let me work part-time," I said, turning my coffee cup slowly in my hands. "Though the reduction in income is challenging." "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet," Martin said, leaning forward slightly. "Eleanor, do you remember Thomas Barrett?" The name caught me by surprise. Thomas Barrett had been one of my first clients when I started at First Capital Bank, a quiet, somewhat eccentric older gentleman who came in every Friday to deposit exactly 142 or 57. Over the years, we'd developed a friendly rapport. I helped him navigate online banking when the branch pushed for digital adoption, spent extra time explaining financial products when he was confused, and once even helped him recover funds from a scam that had targeted seniors in our community. "Of course I remember Mr. Barrett," I said, smiling at the memory. "Is he still coming in every Friday with his clockwork deposits?" Martin's expression turned solemn. "I'm afraid Thomas passed away 3 months ago." "Oh," I said softly, a pang of sadness hitting me unexpectedly. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a kind man." "Yes, he was," Martin agreed. But there's more to the story, Eleanor. What none of us knew, what I suspect even you didn't realize, was that Thomas Barrett was quietly wealthy. Very wealthy. I blinked, trying to process this information. Mr. Barrett, with his worn cardigans and careful counting of coins? It turns out, Martin continued, that Thomas made a series of incredibly shrewd investments in the early tech boom. He lived simply by choice, not necessity. His estate is valued at just over $11 million. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. 11 million? Martin nodded, reaching into his briefcase and withdrawing a thick envelope. Thomas named you in his will, Eleanor. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Me? But why would he? His lawyer contacted corporate headquarters trying to locate you. In his will, Thomas specifically mentioned how your kindness and respect made his later years more dignified. Apparently, you were one of the few people who treated him like a human being, not just an odd old man. Martin slid the envelope across the table. He left you something. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out the legal documents inside. As I scanned the formal language, certain phrases leapt out at me. In recognition of her exceptional character, and to be distributed in full without condition. At the bottom, a figure that made my breath catch. $2 million. I looked up at Martin, unable to form words. It's real, Eleanor, he said gently. It's already been processed through probate. The funds are being held in trust until you're ready to receive them. There are no strings attached, no conditions. Thomas was very clear that this was a gift in recognition of simple human decency, something he found all too rare in his life. Tears welled in my eyes, and I hastily wiped them away. I don't understand. I didn't do anything special. I just treated him the way anyone would want to be treated. Martin's smile was sad. But that's just it. Most people didn't. They saw an eccentric old man in dated clothes and dismissed him. You saw a person worthy of dignity and respect. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's why I've been trying to reconnect with you. The legal team needed to complete the transfer, but I wanted to deliver this news personally. I sat in stunned silence, the implications slowly washing over me. $2 million. It was an incomprehensible sum, more money than I had ever imagined possessing. My entire financial reality had transformed in an instant. There's something else, Martin said, his tone shifting slightly. A professional opportunity, if you're interested. Thomas was on the board of a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for low-income women when he learned about your situation. Working for decades with little retirement security despite your financial acumen, he saw it as emblematic of the very issues the organization addresses. There's a position open for a program director. The board hoped you might consider it. My mind was spinning too quickly to fully process this additional offer. Martin, I need time to think about all of this. Of course, he said kindly. There's no rush on any of it. The money is yours regardless of what you decide about the position. He handed me another card. This is Stephanie Chen, the executive director. When you're ready, give her a call. And this, he slid over a business card for a financial advisor, is someone I trust implicitly. You'll want professional guidance managing your inheritance. As we parted ways at the cafe entrance, Martin hugged me again. Eleanor, whatever you decide to do with this gift, remember that it came to you because of who you are. Thomas recognized your worth long before he had any intention of including you in his will. I nodded, too overwhelmed for words, and watched him walk away before turning toward home. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my purse, as if the paper itself had physical weight beyond its actual mass. $2 million. The sum kept repeating in my mind, foreign and surreal. The walk home was a blur. Inside my modest house, I sank onto the sofa, the legal documents spread before me on the coffee table. It wasn't until I saw the inheritance amount typed in formal legal language that the reality truly began to sink in. I, Eleanor Wright, who had been calculating how to stretch my reduced salary to cover medication and basic living expenses, now had financial security beyond anything I'd ever imagined. My first coherent thought was about Rachel, my daughter, who had suggested I pay her $1,200 monthly rent while recovering from a stroke. Rachel, who had dismissed the $85,000 I'd given her as insignificant. My instinct, the pattern of decades, was to call her immediately, to share this miraculous news, to tell her that now I could help her even more, perhaps pay off her mortgage entirely, or fund her future children's college accounts. My hand actually reached for the phone before something stopped me, a small voice of caution, growing stronger by the second. What would Rachel's reaction be? Relief that her mother was no longer a potential financial burden? Excitement about what this might mean for her own financial future? Would she see this as her inheritance by proxy? For the first time in my adult life, I felt a profound hesitation about immediately centering Rachel in a major decision. This money had come to me because of my own actions, my own character. Not because I was Rachel's mother, but because I was Eleanor Wright, a person who had shown kindness to a lonely old man when others hadn't bothered. I set the phone down and instead called the financial advisor Martin had recommended. The receptionist scheduled an appointment for the following morning, her tone shifting noticeably when I mentioned I was referred by Martin and was handling a substantial inheritance. The subtle change in how I was perceived didn't escape me. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. What would it mean to prioritize my own financial security after decades of putting someone else first? What would it look like to make decisions based solely on what was best for me? The concept was both liberating and terrifying. The next morning, I met with Diane Winters, the financial advisor. Her office was sleek but welcoming, with credentials displayed discreetly on the walls. She greeted me with professional warmth, offering coffee before we began. "Mr. Abernathy spoke highly of you," she said as we settled into comfortable chairs in her private office. "He mentioned you've recently come into a significant inheritance and might need guidance on managing it effectively." "Yes," I said, still finding it surreal to discuss. "It was unexpected." Diane smiled. "Many windfalls are. Before we discuss specific financial strategies, I'd like to understand your current situation and goals. What are your priorities for this inheritance?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, my only financial priority had been providing for Rachel. The concept of having personal financial goals felt almost foreign. "I suppose security," I finally said. "I recently had a health scare that forced me to reduce my work hours. I have very little saved for retirement. Beyond that, I honestly haven't had time to think about it." Diane nodded, taking notes. "That's a perfect starting point. Security first, then we can explore other possibilities once that foundation is established." She asked detailed questions about my current finances, health insurance situation, outstanding debts, and living expenses. As I answered, I felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. Embarrassment at how little I had prepared for my own future. Relief at finally addressing it honestly with someone who didn't judge me for it. "Based on what you've shared," Diane said after completing her notes, "here's what I would recommend as initial steps. First, we should establish a comprehensive health insurance plan that covers your current needs and potential future care. Second, we'll create a retirement income stream that ensures you'll never need to worry about basic expenses again. Third, we'll set aside an emergency fund for unexpected costs." She walked me through various investment options, explaining concepts I vaguely understood from my banking work, but had never applied to my own finances. Conservative income-generating investments, long-term growth strategies, tax considerations. Throughout her explanation, she emphasized one point repeatedly: This money needs to work for you, Eleanor. Not just today, but for the rest of your life. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, we had outlined a preliminary financial plan that made me feel secure for the first time in decades. The inheritance would be divided. A portion for immediate needs, including medical expenses, the bulk invested for long-term income and growth, and a smaller amount set aside for what Diane diplomatically called personal priorities, essentially discretionary spending on things that would improve my quality of life. "What about family?" I asked hesitantly as our meeting concluded. "I have a daughter. Should I be allocating funds specifically for her or potential grandchildren?" Diane looked at me thoughtfully. "That's entirely your decision, Eleanor. Some clients choose to establish trusts or gift funds to family members immediately. Others prefer to secure their own future first, then determine what, if anything, they want to leave as a legacy. There's no right or wrong approach, only what aligns with your values and relationships." Her careful phrasing gave me permission to consider options I'd never felt entitled to before. As I left her office with a folder full of information and our next appointment scheduled, I felt something unfamiliar. A sense of ownership over my financial future that had nothing to do with Rachel's needs or expectations. That evening, Rachel called. We hadn't spoken since our uncomfortable lunch discussion about my potentially moving in with her and William. Seeing her name on my caller ID, I felt a wave of complicated emotions. Love mixed with a new wariness I was still coming to terms with. "Mom," she said when I answered, her voice carrying that slightly impatient tone I'd grown accustomed to. "I've been thinking more about our conversation, and I wanted to check in. Have you made any decisions about your living situation?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything about Mr. Barrett, the inheritance, the financial plan Diane and I had begun developing. The words were on the tip of my tongue, ready to spill out in the pattern of sharing that had defined our relationship for decades. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'm still weighing my options, Rachel. I've been exploring some alternatives that might work better for my recovery." "What alternatives?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. "You mentioned Dr. Morris thought you'd be able to return to full-time work soon. Has that changed?" The small lie I'd told to buy myself time now complicated things. "Not exactly," I said carefully, "but I've been advised to consider all aspects of my recovery, including my living environment. Stress reduction is apparently crucial after a stroke." "Well, that's why our offer makes sense," Rachel said, her tone brightening. "You wouldn't have the stress of maintaining your house or working full-time. You'd have support nearby if needed." Support that would cost me most of my limited income, I thought but didn't say. "It's definitely one option," I replied neutrally. "I'll let you know when I've made a decision. How are the preparations for your Bali trip coming along?" The deflection worked. Rachel launched into details about their luxury resort, the private cooking class they'd booked, and the exclusive snorkeling excursion William had arranged. As she spoke, I found myself calculating the cost of their vacation, easily $15,000 or $20,000, while simultaneously planning to charge her mother $100 or $200 monthly for a guest room during my health recovery. The contrast wasn't lost on me. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I said when she finally paused for breath. "You and William deserve a nice getaway." After we hung up, I sat quietly in my living room, turning over the conversation in my mind. For the first time, I hadn't immediately shared a major life development with my daughter. The inheritance remained my private knowledge, a secret that gave me space to think clearly without the immediate pressure of Rachel's expectations. Was I wrong to withhold this information? The question nagged at me, but another, stronger voice answered. "This is your chance to reset the dynamics of your relationship. Take the time you need to decide how to proceed." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. I worked closely with Diane to implement our financial plan, meeting with healthcare advocates to secure comprehensive insurance coverage, establishing investment accounts, and creating the framework for long-term financial security. The initial deposit from Mr. Barrett's estate arrived, transforming my modest checking account into something I barely recognized. Parallel to these practical matters, I began exploring the opportunity with the nonprofit Martin had mentioned. My conversation with Stephanie Chen, the executive director of the Women's Financial Empowerment Network, left me both intimidated and intrigued. The organization helped women in vulnerable financial situations: single mothers, domestic violence, survivors, elderly women with inadequate retirement savings, develop financial literacy and independence. Your personal experience would be invaluable, Stephanie told me during our video call. We find that women relate most to educators who have faced similar challenges. The position is part-time initially, perfect for your recovery, with flexibility, to grow as you feel ready. The salary was modest, but more than fair for the hours required. What truly attracted me, though, was the opportunity to help women avoid the financial vulnerabilities I'd experienced. The thought of guiding others toward financial independence, something I was only now achieving in my 60s, felt deeply meaningful. I accepted the position and began training, absorbing the curriculum while also bringing my own hard-won insights to the program. For the first time in my professional life, my experiences as a single mother who had prioritized her child's future over her own retirement security weren't seen as foolish choices, but as valuable perspective that could help others navigate similar circumstances more effectively. Through all of this, Rachel remained unaware of the dramatic changes in my life. Our conversations continued, brief and superficial, centered mostly around her work challenges and upcoming vacation. She occasionally asked about my decision regarding moving in with them, but seemed content with my vague assurances that I was still figuring things out. Truth be told, I had already decided. I would not be moving in with Rachel and William. I would not be paying them $200 monthly for the privilege of occupying their guest room. But I wasn't yet ready for the confrontation that would inevitably follow when I declined their offer outright. As Rachel and William departed for their 2-week Bali vacation, I faced another decision: what to do about my housing situation. My modest home, while not luxurious, held decades of memories. I'd originally assumed I would need to sell it given my reduced income, but my new financial reality changed that calculation entirely. Meeting with a contractor, I explored options for modifications that would make the house more suitable for my recovery and long-term needs: a first-floor master suite addition to eliminate stairs, upgraded bathroom fixtures for safety and accessibility, a renovated kitchen with features designed for someone with arthritic hands. These changes would essentially future-proof your home, the contractor explained as we reviewed the preliminary plans. You could comfortably age in place here for many years to come. The estimated cost was substantial, nearly $175,000, for all the modifications I wanted, but well within my means now. I approved the plans, with construction scheduled to begin the following month. As these practical matters fell into place, I found myself grappling with deeper questions about my relationship with Rachel. The inheritance had given me financial independence, but it had also forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about the dynamic between us. Had I enabled Rachel's entitled attitude by always putting her needs first? Had my unquestioning financial support contributed to her seeing me as little more than a resource to be used? My new role at the nonprofit brought these questions into sharper focus. In our financial literacy workshops, we explicitly addressed the balance between supporting loved ones and securing one's own future. "You cannot pour from an empty cup" became a mantra I found myself repeating to program participants, and increasingly, to myself. 3 days before Rachel was due to return from Bali, I received an unexpected call from Caroline, William's mother. We had maintained a cordial but distant relationship over the years, connected only through our children. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying its usual crisp efficiency. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I replied, curious about the purpose of her call. "Is everything all right? Have you heard from Rachel and William?" "Oh, they're fine," she said dismissively. "Having a marvelous time according to William's texts. No, I'm calling about you, actually. Rachel mentioned your health challenges before they left, and I realized I've never properly checked in. How are you feeling?" The question seemed genuine, catching me off guard. "I'm doing much better, thank you, following doctor's orders and taking things day by day." "Good, good," Caroline said. Then, after a slight pause, "Rachel also mentioned you might be moving in with them. I wanted to offer an alternative perspective if I may." My guard immediately went up. "Oh? Eleanor, I've known you for 7 years now. Not well, perhaps, but enough to recognize you're fiercely independent. Living with Rachel and William. Well, I'm not sure it would be the best arrangement for anyone involved." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "Young couples need their space," Caroline went on, "and from what I understand, their offer came with certain financial expectations that seem inappropriate given your recent health crisis." I was stunned. Caroline, who had always struck me as somewhat elitist and firmly in her son's corner on everything, was essentially criticizing Rachel and William's approach. "I'm surprised to hear you say that," I managed. There was a soft sigh on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, I may come across as cold sometimes, but I do understand family loyalty. What Rachel described to me, expecting her mother to pay substantial rent while recovering from a stroke, frankly appalled me. William was raised to respect his elders and care for family in times of need. I've already spoken to him about this, though I doubt it made much difference." I didn't know how to respond. Caroline's unexpected alliance left me momentarily speechless. "Anyway," she continued briskly, "I didn't call to meddle. I simply wanted to let you know that if you need temporary accommodation while sorting out your situation, our guest house is sitting empty. No financial strings attached. It would give you privacy and independence while still having support nearby if needed." The offer was so unexpected that for a moment I wondered if I was misunderstanding. "That's extremely generous, Caroline." "It's what decent people do," she replied simply. "Think about it. No pressure either way." She paused, then added in a softer tone, "And Eleanor, whatever you decide about Rachel and William's offer, know that I respect your dignity too much to ever suggest it was appropriate." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Caroline's call had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the situation. If even William's mother, a woman who had always seemed to embody the privileged entitlement I'd sometimes glimpsed in Rachel, found their behavior objectionable, perhaps I wasn't overreacting to feel hurt and devalued. The validation from an unexpected source strengthened my resolve. It was time to stop avoiding the inevitable confrontation with Rachel. When she returned from Bali, I would decline their offer directly and clearly. I would establish boundaries that protected my newly secured independence. What I didn't yet know was how to address the inheritance. Part of me wanted to keep it private, to maintain the relationships as they were without the distortion money inevitably brings. Another part recognized that hiding such significant information from my daughter went against decades of open communication. As I pondered these questions, preparing myself for Rachel's return, I realized something important. For the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based primarily on what was best for me, not what would please or benefit my daughter. The shift was subtle but profound, a reclaiming of agency I had gradually surrendered over 40 years of parenthood. The Eleanor who had emptied her retirement accounts without hesitation to fund Rachel's education would have immediately shared news of the inheritance, probably offering large portions of it to ease her daughter's financial path further. The Eleanor who sat in her living room now, reviewing renovation plans for her own home and preparing for a meaningful new career, understood that such automatic generosity might no longer serve either of us well. My phone pinged with a text from Rachel. Landing tomorrow afternoon instead of evening. Flight changed. Can't wait to see you and tell you all about Bali. Also, we should finalize the moving plans while William's still on vacation mode. Love you. I took a deep breath, sensing the crossroads ahead. Tomorrow would bring a conversation that would either reset our relationship on healthier terms or reveal that the patterns between us were too deeply entrenched to change. Either way, I would face it not as the self-sacrificing mother who had given everything without question, but as Eleanor Wright, a woman who had finally learned the most important financial lesson of all, her own worth. Rachel arrived at my door the next afternoon, her skin sun-kissed from Bali, designer sunglasses perched on her head. She swept in with the fragrance of expensive perfume, dropping her purse on the counter before embracing me. "Mom, you look good," she said, studying my face. "The color's back in your cheeks. Are you feeling better?" "Much better," I replied, genuinely meaning it. The past few weeks had brought not just financial security, but a renewed sense of purpose that had improved my physical well-being as well. "How was Bali? You look relaxed." Rachel launched into an enthusiastic account of their vacation. The private villa with its infinity pool overlooking the ocean, the exclusive restaurants where William had arranged special chef's table experiences, the custom batik workshop they'd attended in a remote village. As she spoke, she wandered through my modest living room, absently touching surfaces as if reacquainting herself with the smallness of my life compared to the luxury she'd just experienced. "William's still catching up on sleep," she said finally, settling onto my sofa. "The jet lag hit him harder than me, but I couldn't wait to see you and finalize our plans." She smiled, reaching for her phone. "I've already started making lists of what you should bring versus what you could sell or donate. The guest suite isn't huge, so we'll need to be selective." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I'd been rehearsing in my mind. "Actually, Rachel, I've made a decision about that. I won't be moving in with you and William." Her fingers froze over her phone screen. "What? Why not?" "Mom, we've already discussed this. It makes the most financial sense given your situation." "My situation has changed," I said carefully. "I've decided to stay in my home. In fact, I'm planning some renovations to make it more suitable for my long-term needs." Rachel stared at me, confusion and irritation battling across her features. "Renovations? With what money?" "Mom, you've been reduced to part-time work after a stroke. You can barely afford your medications, let alone home renovations." The moment had arrived sooner than I'd anticipated. I could continue deflecting, create some plausible explanation about a bank loan or selling investments I didn't previously have. Or I could be honest about my new circumstances. The choice would shape everything that followed. "There's something I haven't told you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "A few weeks ago, I received some unexpected news. Do you remember Mr. Barrett from the bank?" Rachel's brow furrowed. "That odd old man who used to come in every Friday?" "Vaguely. Why?" "He passed away recently," I explained. "It turns out he was quite wealthy, though he lived very modestly. He left me an inheritance." Rachel's eyes widened. "An inheritance? You? Why would he do that?" I tried not to flinch at her tone, the implication that it was somehow absurd for someone to value me enough to leave me money. We had a special connection over the years. I was kind to him when others weren't. He appreciated that more than I realized. "Okay," Rachel said slowly, visibly recalculating the situation. "So he left you what? A few $1,000s? That's nice, but hardly enough to change your plans. You still need to think practically about your future." It was $2 million. The words hung in the air between us. Rachel's mouth literally dropped open, her expression cycling rapidly through disbelief, shock, and something else I couldn't quite name. $2 million? She finally stammered. That's impossible. You're joking. I'm not, I said quietly. The funds have already been transferred. I've met with a financial advisor and created a plan that will secure my future. That's why I've decided to stay in my home. I can afford to modify it to suit my needs now and for years to come. Rachel stood abruptly, pacing the small space between my coffee table and television. $2 million, she repeated, as if saying it again might make it more comprehensible. And you didn't tell me? You've known for weeks and kept this from me? Her immediate focus on my withholding rather than expressing happiness for my good fortune told me everything about where her priorities lay. I needed time to process it myself, I explained calmly, to understand what it meant for my future and to get professional financial advice before making any decisions. Rachel stopped pacing, her expression suddenly shifting as a new thought visibly occurred to her. This is wonderful news for our whole family, she said, her tone warming considerably. William and I have been talking about starting a family soon, and this changes everything. We could upgrade to a larger home in a better school district, or maybe even pay off our current mortgage and invest the difference. The casual way she incorporated my inheritance into her financial plans, without even asking if I intended to share it, confirmed my deepest concerns. Rachel, I said gently but firmly, this inheritance was left to me specifically. I'm using it to secure my retirement and medical needs, which had been severely underfunded. While I certainly plan to leave something for you eventually, I need to be responsible about ensuring my own security first. Her face hardened. Eventually? Mom, you've lived an incredibly frugal life. Even with the best medical care, you couldn't possibly need $2 million. That's just selfish. The accusation stung, but I held my ground. Is it selfish to want security after decades of financial sacrifice? I emptied my retirement accounts to fund your education. I took out a home equity loan to help with your down payment. I've always put your needs first, often at the expense of my own future. And now you're throwing that in my face? Rachel's voice rose. I never asked you to sacrifice your retirement. That was your choice as a parent. Yes, it was my choice, I agreed. And now I'm making another choice, to ensure I never become the financial burden you clearly feared I would be. I would think you'd be relieved. Rachel flushed. That's not fair. We offered you a place to live. For $1,200 a month, I reminded her quietly. Nearly 2/3 of what I would have earned part-time while recovering from a stroke. In a house I helped you buy. You didn't offer me a place to live, Rachel. You offered me a financial transaction that heavily favored you. We have expenses, she defended, though her tone held less conviction. Adding another person to the household costs money. Yes, it does, I agreed. But there's a difference between asking someone to contribute fairly and treating them as a revenue source. Your grandmother lived with us for 3 years when you were young, if you recall. I never charged her rent despite our tight finances then. She contributed what she could, cooking meals, helping with childcare, pitching in for groceries when possible. Rachel crossed her arms defensively. That was different. Why? Because she was my mother and you're my daughter? Does that reverse the obligation of compassion somehow? My question hung in the air between us. Rachel looked away, unable or unwilling to engage with the fundamental issue I'd raised. Instead, she shifted tactics. So what happens now? She asked, her voice tight. You're suddenly wealthy, and that changes everything between us? Nothing has changed on my end, I said softly. I'm still your mother. I still love you unconditionally. But yes, something has changed. For the first time in my adult life, I have the financial security to make choices based on what's best for me, not just what's best for you. That's going to take some adjustment for both of us. Rachel picked up her purse, her movements sharp with anger. I need to process this. You've had weeks to adjust to being a millionaire. I've had 5 minutes to learn that my mother has been keeping secrets and apparently judging me for not living up to some standard of filial devotion I didn't even know existed. Rachel, I started, but she cut me off. I'm happy for you. Mom, really. Congratulations on your windfall. I just need some time to think. Her tone contradicted her words, each syllable brittle with resentment. Without another word, she walked out, closing the door with controlled precision that spoke louder than a slam would have. I sank onto the sofa, emotionally drained. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I'd feared. Rachel seeing the inheritance as rightfully family money, reacting with entitlement rather than happiness for my good fortune. Yet beneath my sadness, I felt a curious sense of relief. The truth was out now. No more deflection, no more vague explanations. Whatever came next would at least be built on honesty. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie Chen. Team meeting. Move to 2 p.m. tomorrow. New curriculum materials arrived. Exciting stuff. Hope you can make it. The message was a welcome reminder that my world was expanding beyond the narrow confines of my relationship with Rachel. I had meaningful work now, colleagues who valued my perspective, financial security I'd never dreamed possible. My daughter's disappointment, while painful, was no longer the crushing blow it once would have been. I responded to Stephanie, confirming my attendance, then made myself a cup of tea and carried it to my backyard patio. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the maple trees, creating patterns on the worn wooden deck I'd soon be replacing with something more durable and accessible. A metaphor for my life, perhaps, replacing worn, unstable foundations with something built to last. 3 days passed without word from Rachel. I kept busy with my training at the nonprofit, meetings with contractors about the renovation plans, and a follow-up session with Diane to refine my financial strategy. On the 4th morning, I received a text from an unexpected source. William. Eleanor, hoping we might meet for coffee this afternoon. There are some things I'd like to discuss. Regarding recent developments, would 2 p.m. at Redwood Cafe work for you? The formal tone was typical William, but the request itself surprised me. In 7 years, we'd never had a one-on-one conversation of substance. Our relationship existed entirely through Rachel, cordial but distant. I was curious enough to agree, despite my reservations. The Redwood Cafe was upscale but not pretentious, located in the business district where William's firm had offices. He was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, scrolling through emails on his phone. He stood when he saw me, offering a polite smile. Eleanor, thank you for meeting me. Can I order you something? After our drinks arrived, a complex espresso concoction for him, simple black tea for me, William set his phone face down on the table, a gesture of attention I hadn't expected. I understand congratulations are in order, he began. Rachel told me about your inheritance. Thank you, I replied cautiously, unsure of his agenda. William nodded, turning his cup slowly in its saucer. Rachel has been upset since learning about it. Not because of the money itself, he added quickly, but because she feels excluded from something significant in your life. I resisted the urge to point out that Rachel's reaction had been very much about the money itself. I needed time to process everything before sharing the news, I said instead. It was overwhelming. I can imagine, William agreed. Such a substantial windfall would require careful consideration. He paused, choosing his words with obvious care. Eleanor, I want to apologize for our handling of the living arrangement proposal. Rachel mentioned you felt our terms were insensitive, given your health situation. The admission caught me off guard. I appreciate that, William. He nodded again, his expression thoughtful. My mother called me after speaking with you, She was quite direct about her disapproval of our approach. That explained some of it, Caroline's influence carrying more weight than my own feelings had. Still, I was surprised by his willingness to acknowledge the misstep. The truth is, William continued, Rachel and I have been under significant financial pressure, though we've tried to maintain appearances. The house stretched our budget more than was prudent. Rachel's recent promotion helped, but we're still overextended. The idea of additional income from your staying with us became more appealing than it should have, clouding our judgment about what was appropriate. His candor was unexpected. The polished couple who had just returned from a luxury Bali vacation overextended. But the contradiction made sense in a way. Maintaining appearances at any cost, living beyond their means, to project success. Financial pressure doesn't excuse treating family as a revenue source, I said quietly. No, it doesn't, William agreed, surprising me further. My parents would never have approached it that way with their own parents, and I was raised with different values. I should have spoken up. We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient cafe noise filling the space between us. May I ask what your plans are now? William finally asked. Rachel mentioned something about renovating your home? I nodded, explaining my decision to modify my house for long-term accessibility and comfort. William listened attentively, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the renovations. There was a genuine interest in his manner I hadn't experienced from him before. That sounds like an excellent plan, he said when I finished. Aging in place has significant financial and emotional benefits when done properly. It does, I agreed, and I'll have the security of knowing my home is truly mine, adapted to my needs. William hesitated, then said carefully, Eleanor, I hope you know that regardless of how poorly we expressed it, Rachel and I do care about your well-being. This inheritance changes your financial circumstances dramatically, which is wonderful. But even before that, we should have approached things differently. I studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. There seemed to be genuine regret there, though whether for the approach itself or merely for how it had backfired now that I had money, I couldn't entirely tell. I appreciate you saying that, William. I hope we can move forward with a better understanding. He nodded, then glanced at his watch. I should get back to the office. Thank you for meeting with me. I've encouraged Rachel to speak with you directly as well, though she's still processing everything. She'll come around. As we parted outside the cafe, William surprised me with a brief but genuine hug, our first physical contact beyond the most perfunctory holiday or birthday embraces. Family is important, Eleanor. More important than pride or money. I hope we can all remember that moving forward. I walked to my car pondering the unexpected conversation. William had shown more self-awareness and humility than I'd given him credit for. Perhaps Caroline's influence ran deeper than the superficial social graces I'd observed. Or perhaps, like many people, he was more complex than the role he typically played in family dynamics. That evening, I received another text, this time from Rachel. Can we talk tomorrow? I'll bring lunch. Noon? Her olive branch, if that's what it was, came with perfect timing. The contractor had finalized the renovation plans that morning, and I'd signed the agreement to begin work the following week. Having clarity about my home's future made me feel more settled and prepared for whatever conversation might come next with Rachel. When she arrived the next day, she looked different. More subdued, less polished than her usual appearance, she carried a bag from my favorite local deli and a bouquet of mixed flowers. Peace offering, she said, holding out the flowers awkwardly. I overreacted. I accepted both the flowers and the gesture, inviting her in. We moved to the kitchen, where she unpacked sandwiches, salads, and 2 slices of carrot cake. My favorite. The familiar ritual of setting out lunch together eased some of the tension between us. I talked to William, Rachel said as we settled at the table. And to his mother, actually. Caroline called me directly, which she never does. She was surprisingly insightful about some things. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, giving Rachel space to continue. She pointed out that I've been taking your support for granted my entire life, Rachel admitted, poking at her salad. She asked me if I'd ever really considered what you sacrificed to give me the opportunities I had. If I'd calculated what you could have accumulated for your own retirement if you hadn't spent it all on me. The directness of Caroline's approach surprised me. That must have been an uncomfortable conversation. Rachel gave a short laugh. Excruciating. Caroline doesn't sugarcoat anything. But she was right. She set down her fork, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. I'm sorry, Mom. I reacted to your inheritance like it was somehow my money, when I should have just been happy that you finally caught a break after decades of putting everyone else first. The apology was more self-aware than I'd expected. Thank you for saying that, Rachel. It means a lot. I keep thinking about what you said, about Grandma living with us when I was little. I do remember that. I remember how you never complained, about the extra mouth to feed or the space she took up in our tiny apartment. You just made it work because she was family and she needed help. I nodded, memories of those challenging but love-filled years washing over me. We managed. And then I think about how we treated you when you needed help, Rachel continued, her voice tight with emotion. Calculating a rental fee based on market rates, like you were a tenant rather than my mother. It's embarrassing looking back. On it. We all make mistakes, I said softly. What matters is recognizing them and growing. Rachel pushed her salad around her plate. The thing is, Mom, I'm not sure it was just a mistake. I think it revealed something about who I've become. Someone so focused on financial advantage that I've lost sight of more important values. She looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't like who I saw in the mirror after our last conversation. The raw honesty in her words touched me deeply. This was the daughter I'd raised, capable of self-reflection and growth, not just the entitled woman who had emerged in recent years. We all lose our way sometimes, I said gently. The important thing is finding your path back. Rachel nodded, wiping at her eyes. I want to do better. I've been thinking a lot about the example you set my entire life. Always giving, always putting me first. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing that as weakness rather than strength. I started believing that financial success was the only measure that mattered. It's an easy trap to fall into, I acknowledged, especially in circles where status and appearance are highly valued. Like William's family, Rachel said with a wry smile. Except, ironically, Caroline is the one who called me out on my values. She said she didn't raise William to treat family as financial transactions, and she was disappointed to see that's what our marriage had become in some ways. I raised my eyebrows, surprised at Caroline's bluntness. That's quite an observation from your mother-in-law. Rachel laughed softly. Caroline doesn't hold back once she decides to weigh in on something. But she wasn't wrong. She reached across the table, hesitantly taking my hand. Mom, I'm truly happy about your inheritance. You deserve every penny and more. And I respect your decision to secure your own future first. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Rachel. That means more than, you know. So tell me about these renovation plans, she said, squeezing my hand before releasing it to return to her lunch. William mentioned you're doing some significant modifications to the house. I described the changes I'd planned. The first-floor master suite addition, the accessible bathroom features, the kitchen upgrades designed to accommodate my arthritis. As I talked, Rachel listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking thoughtful questions or offering suggestions. It sounds perfect, she said when I'd finished. A home that will grow with you and support your independence for years to come. That's the goal, I agreed. To create a space where I can age comfortably and safely, Rachel hesitated, then asked carefully, "And the nonprofit position William mentioned? Something about financial literacy for women?" I told her about the Women's Financial Empowerment Network, the training I'd been doing, and the program director role I'd be stepping into the following month. As I described the work, I felt my enthusiasm building. The opportunity to help other women avoid the financial vulnerabilities I'd experienced felt deeply meaningful. "That's actually perfect for you," Rachel said, her expression thoughtful. "You've always had this talent for explaining financial concepts clearly. I remember how you taught me about budgeting when I was little, using those jars for different expenses." The memory made me smile. Rachel, at 8 years old, carefully dividing her allowance into labeled jars for saving, spending, and giving. I'd forgotten about that. "I haven't," Rachel said softly. "There are many things you taught me that I've held on to, even if it hasn't seemed that way lately." She paused, then added, "I'm proud of you, Mom, for this new chapter you're creating. You deserve every bit of security and purpose this brings you." Her words, the simple acknowledgement of my right to prioritize my own well-being after decades of putting hers first, felt like a healing balm on a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged. "That means a lot to me, Rachel. More than I can express." As we finished lunch and moved to the living room with our coffee, the conversation shifted to more practical matters. Rachel asked thoughtful questions about my financial plan, genuinely interested in how I was structuring things for long-term security. When I mentioned the advice Diane had given about possibly establishing a modest trust for future grandchildren's education, Rachel's eyes softened. "You're still thinking of us even now," she said. "Of course I am," I replied honestly. "Securing my own future doesn't mean I've stopped caring about yours. It just means I've finally recognized that I need to put on my own oxygen mask first, as they say on airplanes." Rachel nodded, understanding the metaphor. "It's a lesson I need to learn too," she admitted. "William and I have been living beyond our means, trying to keep up appearances. It's exhausting and ultimately empty. Maybe it's time we reassessed our priorities as well." As she prepared to leave a couple of hours later, Rachel embraced me, tightly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see what should have been obvious," she whispered. "You've given me everything. All I've done is take." "That's not entirely true," I said, pulling back to look at her. "You've given me purpose and joy for 40 years. Being your mother has been the greatest privilege of my life." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be worthy of that. I want to be the daughter you deserve." "You are," I said simply. "Even with our missteps and misunderstandings, we're both learning and growing still." After she left, I stood in my doorway, watching her car disappear down the street. The conversation had gone better than I'd dared hope. Not just Rachel's acceptance of my new circumstances, but her genuine self-reflection about our relationship patterns. Whether this marked a lasting change remained to be seen. Entrenched behaviors don't transform overnight. But it was a beginning, a first step toward a healthier relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence and obligation. That evening, I sat on my patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie confirming my official start date at the nonprofit, followed by another from the contractor sending updated renderings of my soon-to-be renovated home. Each message represented a piece of the new life taking shape around me, a life I would never have imagined possible just months earlier. The inheritance from Mr. Barrett had given me financial security, yes, but the true gift had been the opportunity to reclaim my own value, not just as Rachel's mother or as a resource for others, but as Eleanor Wright, a woman worthy of security, purpose and respect in her own right. As darkness fell, I made a silent promise to myself. This gift would not be squandered. I would use it to create not just financial security for myself, but a legacy of wisdom for other women. The lessons I'd learned so painfully over decades about balance, boundaries, and self-worth could perhaps help others avoid similar struggles. And maybe, just maybe, the most important legacy would be the reset relationship with my daughter, one built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. A relationship where love flowed freely in both directions, unburdened by obligation or resentment. Only time would tell if that was possible. But for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope that it might be. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. My home renovation progressed from architectural drawings to reality, transforming my modest house into a space perfectly tailored to my needs. The first-floor master suite eliminated my need to navigate stairs. The renovated bathroom featured elegant grab bars disguised as towel racks, and the kitchen now boasted pull-out shelves and arthritis-friendly fixtures. Every detail had been designed not just for accessibility, but for beauty, evidence that practical accommodations didn't need to look institutional. My work at the Women's Financial Empowerment Network evolved from part-time training into a full leadership role. As program director, I oversaw workshops across the city, helping women from all walks of life develop financial literacy and independence. Many of our clients were in situations painfully familiar to me. Single mothers struggling to balance children's needs with their own financial security. Widows who had never managed household finances, suddenly forced to navigate complex financial systems. Women emerging from financially abusive relationships with no credit history or savings. Each woman's story resonated with some aspect of my own journey, though few had experienced the unexpected windfall that had transformed my situation. Their determination to build security from far fewer resources than I now had humbled me daily and fueled my commitment to the work. On a crisp autumn morning, I arrived at our downtown office early to prepare for a special workshop we'd been planning for months. Financial independence. After 50, it's not too late. Targeted women in their 50s and 60s who had neglected retirement planning while caring for others. The event had filled to capacity within days of being announced, revealing the depth of need for this specific guidance. Stephanie met me in the conference room, helping arrange handouts and check the presentation technology. The waiting list is up to 37 people, she said, adjusting a row of chairs. We might need to schedule a repeat session next month. I think you're right, I agreed, reviewing my presentation notes one final time. The response has been overwhelming. Because it speaks directly to an underserved demographic, Stephanie said. Women who've spent decades as caregivers often feel financially hopeless by the time they reach their 50s. You're living proof that it's possible to turn things around. I smiled, acknowledging the irony. Though my particular turnaround method isn't exactly replicable. No, Stephanie laughed. We can't promise everyone a surprise multi-million-dollar inheritance. But your experience before that, the sacrifices, the financial vulnerability, the realization that you needed to prioritize your own security, that resonates universally. She wasn't wrong. When I shared elements of my story in workshops, the nods of recognition were immediate. Women saw themselves in my decades of putting everyone else's needs before my own, in my failure to build adequate retirement savings while funding my child's education and first home, in my health crisis that had exposed the precariousness of my financial situation. The inheritance remained a plot twist in my narrative, but the real lesson lay in what came before and after, how financial vulnerability had shaped my life choices, and how financial independence had empowered me to establish healthier patterns and boundaries. As attendees began arriving for the workshop, I greeted them warmly, recognizing the mixture of hope and anxiety in their expressions. Many came alone, clutching notebooks and pens, their body language suggesting they weren't entirely comfortable discussing financial matters. Others arrived in pairs, friends supporting each other through what they clearly anticipated would be a challenging but necessary conversation about their futures. At precisely 9:30, I moved to the front of the room and began. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eleanor Wright. 6 months ago, I was 64 years old with less than $20,000 in retirement savings, recovering from a stroke, and facing the prospect of working well into my 70s just to keep a roof over my head. Today, I'm going to share how I rebuilt my financial foundation and how you can too, even if you think it's too late. The room grew quiet, all eyes focused intently on me. I continued. I want to be transparent from the start. My personal journey includes an unexpected inheritance that changed my financial reality dramatically. That's not going to happen for most people. But what I learned both before and after that event applies to everyone in this room, regardless of your current resources. For the next 3 hours, I guided the group through practical strategies for late-stage retirement planning, maximizing Social Security benefits, cutting expenses without sacrificing quality of life, leveraging existing assets, and building financial boundaries with adult children. Throughout the presentation, I wove in elements of my personal experience, emphasizing the mindset shifts that had proven as valuable as the financial resources themselves. The most important thing I've learned, I told them as we approached the final segment, is that it's never too late to reclaim your financial power. The same skills that made you an effective caregiver, resourcefulness, persistence, attention to detail, can be redirected towards securing your own future. During the networking lunch that followed, I circulated among the tables, answering individual questions and connecting women with similar circumstances. At one table, I met Patricia, a 62-year-old widow whose story particularly resonated with me. I put 3 children through college, she explained, twisting her napkin nervously. My husband handled all our finances before he passed. Now I'm trying to figure out how to make my teacher's pension stretch for what could be 20 or 30 more years. That's exactly why workshops like this matter, I said, sitting down beside her. You're not starting from zero knowledge. You're already managing day-to-day expenses successfully. Now we're just expanding that skill set to include long-term planning. Patricia smiled tentatively. When you talked about establishing financial boundaries with adult children, that hit home. My youngest son moved back in after college and hasn't contributed anything to household expenses for 2 years. I keep thinking I should be able to support him while he finds himself, but my retirement account isn't growing while I wait. I nodded, recognizing the familiar pattern. It's difficult to change established dynamics, especially when they're rooted in love. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our adult children is to model financial responsibility and self-care. How did you do it? Patricia asked. How did you shift from always giving to setting limits? The question gave me pause. How had I done it? The inheritance had provided the financial leverage, certainly, but the internal shift had begun before that, with the realization that decades of unquestioning generosity had created unhealthy expectations rather than gratitude. It started with recognizing my own worth, I told her finally, understanding that securing my future wasn't selfish but necessary, and then communicating that clearly to my daughter, not with anger or blame, but with honesty about my needs and limitations. Patricia nodded slowly. I keep waiting for my son to notice that I'm struggling, but he doesn't see it because I've always made everything work somehow. They don't see what we don't show them, I said gently. Our children grow up watching us magically make ends meet, never witnessing the sacrifices and stress behind that magic. Unless we explicitly tell them, how would they know? The conversation continued, Patricia growing more confident as we discussed specific approaches for resetting expectations with her son. By the end of our talk, she had committed to a family meeting that weekend to establish new household contribution expectations. As the event concluded and the last participants departed with resource packets and follow-up appointment schedules, Stephanie joined me in collecting abandoned coffee cups and stray handouts. That was powerful, she said, her expression thoughtful. I overheard so many breakthrough conversations happening during lunch. You have a gift for making difficult financial realities feel approachable rather than overwhelming. It helps that I've lived most of what I'm teaching, I replied, straightening a stack of financial planning worksheets. There's no substitute for experience. Speaking of experience, Stephanie said, the Foundation Board is considering expanding our Senior Women's Financial Literacy Program into a full department with dedicated staff and resources. They'd like you to lead it. I paused, surprised by the offer. That's a significant commitment. It would be, Stephanie agreed. Full-time, leadership role, department budget oversight, curriculum development. The grant funding is already secured for 3 years. She smiled. They were very impressed with the outcomes from your programs these past 6 months. The opportunity was both exciting and somewhat daunting. At 65, most of my peers were retiring or scaling back professional commitments, not taking on expanded leadership roles. Yet the work energized me in ways I hadn't experienced in decades. The perfect intersection of my personal experience and professional skills. I'd like to think about it, I said. It's a substantial commitment at a time when I'm still adjusting to many life changes. Of course, Stephanie nodded. The board meeting isn't until next month. Take your time considering it. She paused, then added quietly, for what it's worth, Eleanor, I can't think of anyone better suited for this role. You've lived the journey from financial vulnerability to empowerment. That authenticity is what makes your guidance so valuable. Her words stayed with me as I drove home that afternoon, the autumn sunlight gilding the changing leaves along my route. The Foundation's offer represented yet another unexpected door opening in what had become a year of transformations. From stroke patient-facing financial insecurity to prospective department head of a well-funded nonprofit initiative, the trajectory was nothing I could have imagined 12 months earlier. As I pulled into my newly paved driveway, I noticed Rachel's car parked in front. She sat on my renovated front porch, bundled against the October chill, 2 takeout coffee cups beside her. Surprise visit, she called as I approached. I brought your favorite, cinnamon dolce latte with almond milk. Perfect timing, I smiled, settling into the comfortable new porch chair beside her. I just finished a big workshop downtown. The warm drink is exactly what I needed. Rachel handed me the cup, studying my face. You look energized. Was the event successful? Very, I nodded. Full house, engaged participants. And I might have been offered a promotion of sorts. Heading up a new department focused specifically on financial literacy for senior women. Mom, that's wonderful. Rachel's enthusiasm seemed genuine, a marked change from 6 months earlier when she might have questioned why I would take on more responsibility at my age. Are you going to accept? I sipped my latte, considering. I'm tempted. The work is meaningful. The team is excellent, and the funding is secured for 3 years. But it would mean committing to a full-time leadership role when I was originally thinking of scaling back professionally. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. What does your heart tell you? The question caught me by surprise. Not the content, but the source. Rachel asking about my emotional response rather than analyzing the practical implications represented a subtle but significant shift in our dynamic. My heart says yes, I admitted. When I'm working with these women, sharing what I've learned, and watching them reclaim their financial power, I feel more fulfilled than I have in decades. Then I think you have your answer, Rachel said simply. You've always taught me to pursue work that matters. This clearly matters to you deeply. I studied my daughter's face, noting the genuine support in her expression. Thank you for that perspective. I'll give it serious thought. I gestured to her unexpected visit. What brings you by today? Everything all right? Rachel tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. I wanted to talk to you about something. William and I have been doing a lot of thinking these past few months about our values, our financial choices, our future. I waited, giving her space to continue. "We've decided to sell the house," she said finally. "It's more than we need, especially with the mortgage payment consuming so much of our income. We found a smaller place in Riverside. Still nice, but much more manageable financially." The decision surprised me. Their colonial in the prestigious Oakwood neighborhood had been a status symbol they'd seemed deeply attached to, despite the financial strain it created. "That's a significant change," I said carefully. "Are you comfortable with it?" Rachel smiled ruefully. "More than comfortable, actually. Relieved. We've been house poor for years, pouring everything into a property that was more about impressing others than creating a home we loved." She shook her head. "The smaller place has character, a beautiful garden, lower property taxes, and we can afford it without stretching ourselves to the breaking point." "It sounds lovely," I said, genuinely happy to hear the practical wisdom in her decision. "When do you move?" "Closing is next month on both properties." Rachel hesitated, then continued. "There's something else, Mom. The money you contributed to our down payment on the Oakwood house. We want to return it to you with interest." I started to object, but Rachel held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. This is important to us, to me. You gave us that money when you had so little yourself, taking out a home equity loan you could barely afford. It wasn't right of us to accept it then, and it's definitely not right for us to keep it now that we're selling the property at a profit." Her words warmed me more than the latte in my hands. "Rachel, that's very thoughtful, but unnecessary. My financial situation has changed dramatically. I don't need the money back." "I know you don't need it," Rachel said firmly. "That's not the point. This is about recognizing the sacrifice you made and honoring it properly. William and I have already earmarked those funds from the sale proceeds. We'd really like you to accept it." The gesture represented more than money. It was acknowledgement, respect, a tangible admission that my contribution had been significant rather than dismissible. "All right," I agreed. "Thank you." Rachel relaxed visibly, relieved by my acceptance. "There's one more thing. William and I have been seeing a financial therapist." "A financial therapist?" I repeated, unfamiliar with the term. "It's a relatively new field," Rachel explained. "Professionals who help people understand their psychological relationship with money, the emotional patterns that drive financial decisions. It's been eye-opening." "In what way?" I asked, genuinely curious. Rachel gazed out at the maple tree in my front yard, its leaves a brilliant tapestry of red and gold. "I've realized how much of my financial behavior has been driven by insecurity. Growing up without much made me determined to never feel financially vulnerable as an adult. But instead of creating genuine security through mindful choices, I've been chasing status symbols and external validation." The self-awareness in her assessment impressed me. "That's a profound insight, Rachel." She nodded. "The therapist helped me see how that pattern was affecting my personal relationships too, measuring their value through a financial lens rather than an emotional one." She turned to me, her expression serious. "Including my relationship with you, Mom. I started seeing your financial sacrifices for me not as expressions of love, but as transactions that created obligation. It twisted everything." Her candor touched me deeply. "We all develop complicated relationships with money based on our experiences," I said gently. "Recognizing those patterns is the first step toward changing them." "That's what Dr. Levine says too," Rachel smiled. "She's been helping us develop healthier financial habits and expectations. It's why we felt ready to make the housing change. We're learning to define success differently." We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sipping our drinks, and watching the occasional leaf drift down from the maple. The conversation felt different from any financial discussion we'd ever had. Honest, emotionally aware, unburdened by the power dynamics that had previously defined our interactions. around money. William and I are also reconsidering our timeline for starting a family, Rachel said finally. We've been putting it off, claiming we needed more financial stability first. But the truth is, we were prioritizing career advancement and lifestyle over what we both genuinely want: children. That's a significant realization, I observed. Rachel nodded. The financial therapy helped us see that we were using money concerns as an excuse to avoid deeper fears about parenthood. Once we addressed those fears directly, we recognized that waiting for some mythical, perfect financial moment was just avoidance. Parenthood is never financially convenient, I said with a small smile, remembering my own early struggles as a single mother. But it's worth every sacrifice. That's what I've been reflecting on lately, Rachel said softly. All you gave up to raise me well. I don't think I truly understood the magnitude of it until recently. Until I started facing my own hesitations about making similar sacrifices. She reached over and took my hand, her expression earnest. I want you to know something, Mom. If we are blessed with children, I want them to know their grandmother, not just occasionally, but as a regular, important presence in their lives. Whatever role you want to have, whether it's occasional babysitting or weekly traditions or something in between, it's yours. The invitation, so different from the calculated offer of 6 months ago with its $1,200 monthly rent requirement, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that very much, I managed. Good, Rachel smiled, squeezing my hand. Because any child of mine needs to learn from the woman who modeled strength, sacrifice, and resilience through decades of challenges. Those are the values I want to pass down, not the materialistic ones I've been chasing. As the afternoon light began to fade, Rachel helped me carry our empty cups inside, admiring the completed renovations she hadn't yet seen. She noticed small details: the custom height countertops that reduced strain on my back, the elegant seated vanity in the bathroom, the subtle lighting system I could control entirely from my phone. This is beautiful, Mom, she said, running, her hand along the smooth quartz countertop in the kitchen. Every detail shows such thoughtful planning. It's not just accessible, it's genuinely lovely. That was important to me, I admitted. I wanted a home that accommodated my physical needs without feeling institutional, a place where I could age comfortably but also entertain graciously. Speaking of entertaining, Rachel said, William and I would love to host you for dinner this weekend. Nothing formal, just family time before the moving chaos begins. Would Saturday work? I'd enjoy that, I said, touched by the invitation that felt more genuinely welcoming than any previous gathering at their home. After Rachel left, I moved through my renovated house, appreciating anew the thoughtful modifications that had transformed it into a space perfectly suited to my needs. The master suite with its wide doorways and zero-threshold shower, the kitchen with its accessible storage solutions, the sunroom addition where I could enjoy my garden view year-round, regardless of mobility challenges that might develop in future years. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. No pressure, but the board chair asked specifically about your interest in the department head position. When you're ready to discuss further, I'm available. I sat in my favorite chair, by the window considering the opportunity. The role would be challenging, utilizing both my banking background and my personal experience navigating financial vulnerability as an older woman. It would mean committing to full-time work when many my age were retiring, but the prospect energized rather than daunted me. Most importantly, the position would allow me to help other women avoid the financial precariousness I had experienced, to transform my personal journey into a roadmap others could follow toward greater security and independence. I texted back, "Let's meet tomorrow. I'm leaning toward yes." Setting down my phone, I gazed out at the garden as twilight descended. The property looked different now, professionally landscaped with accessible pathways and raised beds that would allow me to continue gardening despite arthritis. Like everything else in my home, the garden had been adapted to support my changing needs while remaining beautiful and fulfilling. A metaphor for my life, perhaps. Adapted, not diminished. Changed, but still blooming. The dinner at Rachel and William's home that Saturday revealed further evidence of their evolving perspective. Rather than the elaborately staged gatherings they'd previously hosted, clearly designed to impress with expensive wines and restaurant-quality meals, this evening felt genuinely relaxed. Rachel had prepared a simple but delicious pasta dish she remembered I loved, served on their everyday dishes rather than the formal china they typically used when entertaining. Their home looked different too. Boxes stacked in corners, walls bare where artwork had been removed in preparation for the move. William gave me a tour of the new house via photos on his tablet, pointing out features they particularly loved. The reading nook with built-in bookshelves, the compact but efficient kitchen, the small garden already planted with perennials. "It's about half the square footage of this place," he admitted. "But honestly, we never used most of the space here anyway. The formal dining room, the third bedroom, they just became expensive storage areas. The new place feels like us," Rachel added from the kitchen where she was preparing coffee. "Or at least who we want to be, less focused on impressing others, more interested in creating a comfortable home that reflects our actual values." The shift in their perspective seemed genuine, evidenced in small ways throughout the evening. When William mentioned a colleague's recent vacation home purchase, it was with thoughtful reflection rather than envy. When Rachel discussed their moving plans, she emphasized donating unneeded items rather than replacing everything with new purchases for the smaller space. After dessert, a simple apple crisp Rachel remembered I'd made often during her childhood. William excused himself briefly, returning with an envelope. "We wanted to make this official," he said, sliding it across the table to me. "The repayment of your down payment contribution, with interest calculated at the standard investment rate over the 5 years. The funds have already been transferred to your account." I opened the envelope, finding a detailed statement showing the original $85,000 plus accumulated interest, totaling just over $118,000. The amount was significant, despite my current financial security. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. "This represents real commitment to your new financial perspective." "It's the right thing to do," Rachel said simply. "We should have acknowledged the significance of your contribution years. Ego." "What will you do with it?" William asked. "I imagine it's just a drop in the bucket compared to your inheritance, but still. Any special plans?" I considered the question, an idea forming that had been percolating since my conversation with Patricia at the workshop. "Actually, I think I'll use it to establish a small grant program through the Women's Financial Empowerment Network. Emergency funds for women over 50 facing health crises without adequate financial resources." Rachel's eyes widened. "That's perfect, Mom. Helping others facing the exact situation you encountered before your inheritance." "Exactly," I nodded. "The grants wouldn't solve long-term financial insecurity, but they could provide breathing room during health emergencies, preventing the downward spiral of job loss, depleted savings, and potential homelessness that many older women face after medical crises." "Would the grants be named?" William asked, his professional interest in philanthropic structures showing. "Perhaps the Eleanor Wright Emergency Fund for Women?" The suggestion caught me by surprise. I hadn't thought that far, I admitted. I was focused on the concept rather than the naming. "You should consider it," William encouraged. "Not for recognition, but because attaching your name creates a personal connection that might inspire others to contribute as well. Stories drive philanthropy more than abstract concepts." His insight was perceptive. The attachment of my name and story might indeed make the fund more relatable to potential donors, a concrete example of the vulnerability many women face and the impact timely assistance could have. "I'll think about it," I promised, touched by their enthusiasm for the concept. As the evening concluded and I prepared to leave, Rachel embraced me warmly. "I'm so proud of the work you're doing," she said quietly. "Turning your experience into hope for others. It's beautiful, Mom." Driving home through the quiet streets, I reflected on the evening's conversations. The changes in Rachel and William seemed substantive rather than superficial. A genuine reevaluation of priorities rather than a temporary adjustment to changed circumstances. Whether financial therapy, Caroline's influence, or simply maturity had prompted the shift, the result was a more authentic relationship between us. The following week brought formal closure to several chapters of this transformative period. I accepted the department head position at the foundation, committing to a 3-year leadership role developing financial literacy programs specifically for older women. Rachel and William completed the sales of both their Oakwood Colonial and their new Riverside bungalow, downsizing thoughtfully rather than simply transferring their excessive belongings to a smaller space. Most significantly, I established the grant program through the foundation, eventually agreeing to William's suggestion of naming it the Eleanor Wright Emergency Fund for Women. The initial $118,000 seed money was quickly supplemented by matching funds from a community foundation, doubling its immediate impact. 6 weeks after our dinner, Rachel called with news that brought our journey full circle. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "I wanted you to be the first to know. William and I are expecting. I'm pregnant." Joy washed through me. Not just for the grandchild I would welcome in approximately 8 months, but for the healed relationship that would allow me to be truly present in this child's life. Not as a financial resource or occasional visitor, but as an integral part of their support system. "That's wonderful news," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you both." "We are too," Rachel said, her happiness evident, even through the phone. "Terrified but excited. And Mom? We want you involved in every step, not because we expect financial help or constant childcare, but because we want our child to know the remarkable woman who made my life possible through countless sacrifices." Her words, acknowledging both my value beyond financial contribution and the reality of my past sacrifices, represented healing I hadn't dared hope for a year earlier. "I'd be honored," I said simply. That evening, I sat in my sunroom watching the last light fade from the autumn sky, contemplating the cycles of giving and receiving that defined family relationships across generations. For decades, I had given to Rachel without expectation of return, emptying my own resources to ensure her opportunities. Now, she was offering something equally precious, the opportunity to be present in her child's life on terms that honored my autonomy rather than exploited my love. The inheritance from Mr. Barrett had provided financial security I never expected, but the true gift of this year had been the reset of fundamental relationship patterns that money alone couldn't have accomplished. Through honest conversations, painful recognitions, and mutual growth, Rachel and I had found our way to a healthier connection, one based on respect rather than obligation, appreciation rather than expectation. As I prepared for bed in my beautifully renovated master suite, I thought about the women I'd met through the foundation, each struggling with her own version of the financial vulnerability I had known. For them, there would likely be no unexpected inheritance, no dramatic reversal of circumstances, but there could be something perhaps equally valuable. The knowledge that it was never too late to reclaim their financial power, establish healthy boundaries, and create security for their remaining years. That was the real legacy I hoped to build, not just for Rachel or her unborn child, but for every woman who had spent decades caring for others at the expense of her own security. The message was simple but profound. Your worth extends beyond what you give to others. Your financial security matters. It's never too late to put yourself first. In the quiet darkness of my bedroom, I made a silent promise to the women I would continue working with through the foundation. Your stories matter. Your sacrifices are seen. Your future deserves protection. And I will use every resource at my disposal, financial, professional, and personal, to help you find the security you deserve. It was, I realized, the promise I wished someone had made to me decades earlier, when I was a young single mother making financial decisions that would leave me vulnerable in my 60s. But perhaps that was the point, that our hardest journeys often prepare us to guide others through similar terrain, transforming personal struggle into collective wisdom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, new opportunities to share what I had learned. But tonight, wrapped in the security of my transformed life, I felt profound gratitude, not just for the unexpected wealth that had changed my financial reality, but for the deeper riches of purpose, connection, and the chance to turn my hardest lessons into hope for others. 2 years passed, each day bringing new growth and transformation. My granddaughter Lily celebrated her first birthday in the backyard of Rachel and William's riverside bungalow, her chubby hands smashing cake while family gathered around, laughing and taking photos. I watched from a comfortable chair, my heart full as I observed the beautiful child who had brought such joy to our lives. The Eleanor Wright Emergency Fund for Women had assisted 27 women through health crises, providing critical financial support during vulnerable periods. Each recipient had a story that echoed elements of my own: the retired teacher who suffered a heart attack while still working part-time to supplement her inadequate pension, the widow whose husband's medical bills had depleted their savings before his death, the small business owner whose cancer diagnosis threatened both her health and livelihood. What had begun as a modest initiative funded by the repayment of Rachel's down payment had grown substantially. William, putting his financial expertise to good use, had helped structure the fund as a separate nonprofit entity with its own board and fundraising capacity. His connections in the financial world had brought corporate sponsorships and matching grants that expanded our reach far beyond what I had initially imagined. Rachel, too, had found ways to contribute that aligned with her professional skills. Now working reduced hours as she balanced motherhood and career, she had developed a pro bono marketing strategy for the fund, creating compelling materials that shared recipients' stories with permission to illustrate the impact of timely financial intervention. "It's the storytelling that drives donations," Rachel explained during a board meeting, where she presented the latest campaign results. "When potential donors understand that these are women who did everything right, worked hard, raised families, saved what they could, but still ended up financially vulnerable due to circumstances beyond their control, they connect emotionally with the mission." Her insight proved accurate. Donations had steadily increased as we refined our messaging, helping donors see recipients not as charity cases, but as women deserving dignity and support during temporary crises. The fund now operated alongside my work at the foundation, complementing the financial literacy programs with direct assistance for immediate needs. My role had evolved as well. What began as department leadership had expanded to include regular speaking engagements at conferences focused on women's financial security. My story, from single mother sacrificing retirement savings for her daughter's education, to stroke patient facing financial vulnerability, to financially secure advocate helping others avoid similar struggles, resonated deeply with diverse audiences. "Your journey captures the financial vulnerability many women face as they age," noted Dr. Hansen, a gerontologist who had invited me to address a medical conference on aging and economic security. Particularly the statistical reality that women over 60 are the fastest-growing homeless demographic in many urban areas, often following health crises that deplete savings and disrupt employment. The statistics were sobering. Women lived longer than men on average but retired with significantly less savings. They were more likely to have interrupted careers due to caregiving responsibilities. They often outlived spouses who had managed household finances, leaving them unprepared to navigate complex financial systems alone. These realities fueled my commitment to both the educational programs at the foundation and the emergency support provided through the fund. Each woman whose financial trajectory we helped stabilize represented a potential crisis averted, a life sustained with dignity rather than descending into desperation. On a bright spring morning, as I prepared for a meeting with a major potential donor to the fund, I received an unexpected call from Caroline, William's mother. Though our relationship had warmed considerably over the past 2 years, particularly following Lily's birth, we weren't in the habit of regular phone conversations. "Eleanor," she began without preamble, her voice carrying its characteristic, crisp efficiency. "I've been following the work you're doing with that emergency fund of yours. It's quite impressive." "Thank you, Caroline," I replied, somewhat surprised by her interest. "It's grown beyond what we initially envisioned." "Precisely why I'm calling," she continued. "The Harrington Family Foundation, that's my husband's, Family Foundation has been reassessing its giving priorities for the coming fiscal year. I've suggested your organization as a potential grant recipient." I sat down, taken aback by the unexpected offer. The Harrington name was well known in philanthropic circles, their foundation supporting numerous causes with substantial funding. "That's very generous, Caroline. May I ask what prompted your interest?" There was a brief pause before she answered, her tone softening slightly. "2 things, actually. First, the data is compelling. Women's financial vulnerability in later life is a vastly underfunded issue with significant societal implications. Second," she hesitated, then continued more quietly, "I've been impressed by how you've handled everything, Eleanor. The inheritance, the relationship reset with Rachel, the way you've channeled your experience into helping others. It's admirable." The compliment, coming from a woman who had once embodied the social judgment I'd felt keenly as a single mother without financial resources, meant more than I expected. "That's kind of you to say." "Not kind. Accurate," Caroline's brisk tone returned. "The foundation typically funds at the $250,000 level for initial grants to new partners. Would that be useful to your organization?" I nearly dropped the phone. $250,000 would more than double our annual operating capacity, allowing us to assist dozens of additional women while expanding our post-crisis financial counseling program. "That would be transformative," I managed. "Good. I'll have our executive director contact you to begin the formal application process. It's largely a formality. The board has already expressed preliminary approval based on my recommendation." She paused again, then added, "William speaks very highly of how you've structured the fund. Apparently, my son has found meaningful purpose in helping manage its growth." "He's been invaluable," I acknowledged truthfully. William's financial expertise had guided the fund's development with a professionalism I couldn't have provided. Alone. We couldn't have achieved this level of impact without him. "Yes, well," Caroline said, a hint of maternal pride breaking through her businesslike demeanor. "He seems more fulfilled by this pro bono work than by much of what he does, professionally. Perhaps there's a lesson there." Before I could respond to this unexpected philosophical observation, she continued briskly, "I'll send William the foundation contact information. He can help prepare the application materials. Good day, Eleanor." After we hung up, I sat in momentary stunned silence before calling Rachel to share the news. Her excited response warmed me. Genuine enthusiasm for the fund's potential expansion, rather than any hint of resentment that her mother-in-law's family foundation would be supporting my initiative rather than something directly benefiting her. "Mom, that's incredible," she exclaimed. "The Harrington Foundation is incredibly selective. Caroline must really believe in what you're doing." "It appears so," I said, still processing the unexpected development. She mentioned William's involvement as a factor in their interest. "He'll be thrilled," Rachel said. "He was just saying last weekend how he wishes he could devote more time to the fund. His regular clients don't inspire the same passion." The observation aligned with subtle changes I'd noticed in William over the past 2 years. The ambitious investment banker focused primarily on wealthy clients, and his own advancement had gradually revealed a more thoughtful side. One genuinely concerned with financial justice and using his expertise to help those typically excluded from high-level financial guidance. Caroline mentioned something similar, I noted, about him finding fulfillment in this work. It's true, Rachel confirmed. We've been talking a lot lately about purpose versus paycheck. The financial therapy opened conversations about what truly matters to us, and we're both realizing it isn't necessarily what we originally chased. Later that week, while babysitting Lily so Rachel could attend a work event, I reflected on the remarkable evolution our family had undergone. The same granddaughter who might have known me only as an occasional visitor paying rent to stay in her parents' guest room now spent regular time in my home, delighting in the garden I'd designed to be accessible as my mobility changed with age. Rachel and William, once fixated on projecting affluence regardless of the financial strain, now lived within their means in a home they truly enjoyed, making career decisions based on fulfillment rather than status. Most remarkably, William had discovered genuine purpose in helping women achieve financial stability, women from backgrounds more similar to mine than to his privileged upbringing. And I, who had once believed my value lay exclusively in what I could provide for Rachel, had created a life rich with purpose, security, and meaningful work that extended far beyond family obligations. As Lily napped peacefully in the portable crib Rachel had set up in my sunroom, I reviewed presentation materials for an upcoming workshop series targeting women approaching retirement with inadequate savings. The curriculum we'd developed offered practical strategies for maximizing limited resources, everything from Social Security optimization to healthcare navigation to housing alternatives. My phone pinged with a text from Patricia, the widow I'd met at our first workshop 2 years earlier. She had since joined our volunteer corps, providing peer support to women receiving emergency funds while rebuilding her own financial foundation. Just helped a new recipient complete her housing application, the message read. Reminded me of where I was when we first met. Eternally grateful for your guidance, Eleanor. You changed the trajectory of my later years. Her words touched me deeply. From one life change to dozens, then hundreds. The ripple effect extended far beyond anything I could have imagined when I first shared my story with that room full of anxious women facing their own financial vulnerability. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. I checked that Lily was still sleeping soundly before answering, finding William on my porch, his expression unusually animated for a weekday afternoon. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, glancing past me. Rachel mentioned she had a work event and you were watching Lily. She's napping, I assured him, inviting him in. Everything all right? You don't usually stop by midday. William followed me to the kitchen, declining my offer of coffee. My mother called about the Harrington Foundation grant, he explained, his excitement evident. I've been reviewing the application materials, and Eleanor, this could be just the beginning. If the initial grant goes well, they typically renew at increased levels in subsequent years. I smiled at his enthusiasm. It's remarkable, William. I never expected the fund to grow to this level when we first established it. That's actually why I stopped by, he said, setting his briefcase on the counter and withdrawing a folder. I've been thinking about sustainability and expansion. The Harrington Grant provides an opportunity to establish a more permanent endowment structure that could ensure the fund's longevity beyond any single funding source. As he spread financial projections across my kitchen island, the technical language of investment yields and endowment structures flowing easily, I was struck by the transformation in the man before me. This was not the somewhat detached son-in-law, who had once calculated a market-rate rent for his mother-in-law's recovery stay. This was a passionate advocate deploying his considerable financial expertise to help vulnerable women he would never meet. These projections are conservative, he explained, pointing to a graph showing potential growth over 10 years. But, even with minimal additional fundraising beyond the Harrington grant, an endowment model could sustain operations indefinitely at current levels. With active development, we could potentially triple the number of women served annually. His eyes shone with genuine purpose as he outlined the vision. A permanent resource ensuring that women facing health crises wouldn't simultaneously face financial devastation. I remembered Rachel's words about their ongoing discussions of purpose versus paycheck, seeing the evidence before me. "William," I said when he paused for breath, "this is impressive work. But may I ask what draws you to this particular cause? You've devoted significant time and expertise to the fund, far beyond what family obligation might expect." He looked momentarily surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "I've been asking myself that same thing lately," he admitted. "Part of it started as wanting to support something important to Rachel and you. But then I met some of the fund recipients during the planning meetings." He trailed off, seemingly searching for the right words. "Before that, women in financial crisis were an abstract demographic to me," he finally continued. But sitting across from Patricia, hearing how a 40-year nursing career ended with inadequate retirement savings and unexpected medical bills, eating through what little she had set aside, it made me question everything about the financial systems I've been part of professionally. He straightened a spreadsheet absently. "The clients I typically serve have multiple layers of financial protection, insurance, investments, trusts. They'll never experience the vulnerability these women face. Yet the system directs the most sophisticated financial guidance to those who need it least, while those facing complex decisions with minimal resources are left to navigate alone." His observation crystallized something I'd felt but never articulated so clearly: the fundamental inequity in access to financial expertise. "That's exactly why the educational component of our work matters so much," I said. "The emergency funds provide immediate relief, but the financial literacy programs help prevent future crises." William nodded emphatically. "Exactly. And that's why I've been talking with my firm about establishing a pro bono division specifically, serving women in financial transition, widowhood, divorce, career interruption, health crisis, using our expertise to benefit those who typically couldn't access it." The initiative represented a significant professional pivot, from focusing exclusively on wealthy clients to creating space for service to vulnerable populations. "How has your firm responded?" "Mixed reactions," William admitted. "Some partners see the potential for positive publicity and recruitment advantages. Younger financial advisors often seek meaningful pro bono opportunities. Others worry about diluting our exclusive brand." He made air quotes around the word, his distaste evident. "But I'm persistent. And having the Harrington Foundation's interest in similar work adds credibility to the proposal." As we continued discussing possibilities for both the fund's growth and William's professional evolution, I was struck by how profoundly the inheritance had transformed not just my life but the lives around me. The financial security it provided had created space for honest conversations that might never have occurred otherwise. Conversations that had allowed Rachel and William to reassess their values, priorities, and definition of success. The soft sounds of Lily waking came through the baby monitor, ending our discussion. As William helped gather the spreadsheets and projections, he paused, his expression turning reflective. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I never properly apologized for how we approached the living arrangement proposal after your stroke. The rent expectation was my suggestion, based on property values and potential income loss. I framed it as practical financial planning, but in retrospect, it was coldly transactional toward family in crisis. I'm truly sorry." The straightforward apology, delivered 2 years after the fact, touched me with its sincerity. "Thank you, William. That means a lot." If I've learned anything through our work with the fund, he continued, it's that financial decisions are never just about numbers. They reflect our values, our character, what we truly believe about obligation and community. I didn't like what that decision revealed about mine. Before I could respond, Lily's calls became more insistent. We moved to the sunroom where she stood in her portable crib, face brightening at the sight of her father. William lifted her with practiced ease, his formal business demeanor softening as he kissed her cheek. "There's my girl," he said warmly. "Were you good for Grandma Eleanor?" As I watched them together, I marveled at how this child would grow up with such a different understanding of financial values than Rachel had experienced. Instead of witnessing constant financial stress and sacrifice, Lily would see parents who made mindful choices about money aligned with deeper values. Instead of absorbing the message that financial success meant status symbols and competitive consumption, she would learn that true security came from balance, purpose, and community care. And most importantly, she would know her grandmother, not as a financial burden or resource, but as a whole person with wisdom, value, and purpose extending far beyond family roles. When Rachel arrived later to collect Lily, she noticed the financial projections William had forgotten on the counter. "Mom, were you and William talking about the Harrington grant?" "Yes," I nodded. He stopped by with some ideas for establishing an endowment model. He's quite passionate about expanding the fund's reach. Rachel smiled, adjusting Lily on her hip. "He's thinking about making a career change, actually. Stepping back from his current client list to focus more on developing the pro bono division he's been proposing. It would mean a significant income reduction, but..." She shrugged. "We don't need the bigger house or status symbols anymore. We need purpose." The simple statement, "we need purpose," reflected perhaps the most profound shift in their perspective over these 2 years. From a daughter who had once calculated her mother's financial value as a rental tenant to a woman who recognized that meaning mattered more than money. From a son-in-law focused on financial transactions to a man deploying his expertise to help vulnerable women achieve security. "I'm proud of you both," I said simply. As they prepared to leave, Rachel handed me an envelope. "We've been meaning to give you this. Information about the family vacation we're planning for this summer. A lakeside cabin rental for a week in August. William's parents will join for part of the time, but we've reserved the full week for you. We thought it would be nice to start an annual tradition that Lily will grow up remembering." The thoughtful inclusion, not as a babysitter or financial contributor, but as an integral part of their family plans, warmed me deeply. "I'd love that, Rachel. Thank you." After they left, I sat in my sunroom watching twilight gather over my accessible garden, reflecting on the remarkable journey of these past years. From the devastating vulnerability exposed by my stroke to the unexpected inheritance that had changed everything. From painful confrontations about financial expectations to the healed relationships that now brought such joy. The financial security provided by Mr. Barrett's gift had been transformative, certainly. But the true transformation had come through the honest conversations, boundary setting, and reprioritization that financial independence had made possible. Now that security extended beyond me, to the women served by the fund, to Rachel and William's more balanced approach to success, to little Lily, who would grow up understanding money as a tool for security and purpose, rather than status and power. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, I thought about all the women still facing the financial vulnerability I had once known. Women who would never receive unexpected inheritances, but who deserved security and dignity nonetheless. The fund would reach some. The Foundation's programs would educate others. William's proposed pro bono division might serve still more. Each represented a ripple extending outward from that pivotal moment, when I had finally recognized my own worth beyond what I could give to others. When I had found the courage to say, "My financial security matters too." That courage, more than the inheritance itself, had been the true gift. A gift I now shared with every woman who attended our workshops, received emergency funds, or found hope in the message that it was never too late to reclaim their financial power. And perhaps most meaningfully, it was the gift I had ultimately given back to Rachel. Freedom from the burden of seeing her mother as a financial liability, replaced by the joy of knowing me as a whole person with purpose, wisdom, and value immeasurable in monetary terms. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt profound gratitude, not just for the financial security that had transformed my circumstances, but for the deeper riches of purpose, connection, and the knowledge that my hardest experiences now served as beacons of hope for others traveling similar paths. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. A meeting about the Harrington grant application, a workshop for women transitioning to retirement, lunch with Patricia to discuss expanding, the peer support program. Each represented another thread in the tapestry of meaningful work that now defined my days. The inheritance had changed my financial reality overnight. But the journey from vulnerability to empowerment, from sacrifice to balance, from financial insecurity to purposeful impact, that had been the true transformation, one choice at a time. And in that transformation lay the most important lesson I could share with the women I now served. Your worth extends far beyond what you give to others. Your security matters. It's never too late to put yourself first. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.